Now, I'm at the Botanic Gardens here in Glasgow today, and it is a really beautiful landscape. The Botanical Gardens was founded in 1817 and is home to a lot of rare different plants. But of course, as you know, when you work on the flora, the fauna soon follows. And around the Botanic Gardens and the wider area of Glasgow, you've got so many different birds of prey. Barn owls, sparrowhawks, kestrels, you name it. And they're so nice to see, soaring above the skies here. Now, earlier on, I went to meet up with Steven McGrath from the Scottish Raptor Study Group to learn a little bit more about kestrels in an urban environment. Right, well, we've got all of the material here, and I guess we've got to roll our sleeves up and get building.
Get it started.
Flip it.
Yep.
Looking good. So how many of these boxes have you got active at the minute?
30 roughly. So we've linked up my kestrel boxes with the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group, their kestrel boxes, and it's one of the biggest studies in the UK now.
For kestrels?
For kestrels.
That's great, isn't it? It's like the power of collaborating with one another, getting all that data together.
We get them red ringed, so we can see how far they're travelling, how long they're living for.
So good for their conservation, isn't
Definitely.
it?
With the bird box built, Steven invites me to join licensed ringer Mark and his assistant Jackie to ring some kestrel chicks being reared in one of his established nest boxes.
Very excited because you've got some kestrel chicks.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what the plan is.
We're going to ring the chicks with two specific types of ring. One's a metal ring and one's a colour ring. That will enable us to identify individual birds. The big question for us is, we know kestrels are in a decline, but why are kestrels in the decline? And hopefully that projects like this will help us come to that answer. So the good news is we've got 3 healthy chicks. So we use very specialised rings supplied with the BTO.
This also gives the opportunity to collect other important information by measuring the chicks.
So that all this data is vitally important for the science of understanding these birds.
Yeah, especially because changes are happening to these populations so quickly.
Yeah, there's lots of things that are pressurising these little birds. If there's no natural nest sites like holes in trees or crags, then these birds have difficulty finding a nest site. So these 50 boxes that Steven and the Central Scotland Raptor Study Group have put up undoubtedly are helping these birds.
How does that feel for you, Steven?
That's very rewarding.
Yeah?
To think that you're putting a contribution into getting the population up again.
This project is tremendous in terms of getting a little snapshot about how kestrels are doing here, and it's great to see they're doing really, really well.
Hopefully these little guys go off, have a very successful adulthood, breed in some of your boxes and have a wonderful old kestrel time. Right, you need to go back to your nest. The work that Steven and the Scottish Raptor Study Group do is so critically important, especially for kestrels, because in Scotland, this is where they're declining the most. We've lost 67% of them since 1995. That was the year I was born. It's incredibly sad. But Steven is working his utmost hardest to do what he can for this species, and he's installed cameras into his nest boxes, and we can take a look at one of those live. We've got some young chicks here. A handful, how many are there? About 4, I think. Looking very, very fluffy, very cute. A little way to go before, or they're eating something at the back there. Have they got a shrew or a mouse or something? Well, just been fed by the adult, clearly, and they're bickering over who's going to get to eat it. But you know, of course, that kestrels' main source of diet is rodents. They'll hunt along, you see them hovering, it's a joy to see, and they'll get things like mice, shrews, rats occasionally. They'll hover, pinpoint them with their eyes, very visual hunters, and swoop down on an ambush attack. And then they'll take them back to either their nests to feed their chicks, or like this adult here, he's got 2. He's got 2 to come and eat. Beautiful birds with that grey head and that chestnut, beautiful dappling on the back. But there's been lots of research looking at how these birds are feeding, their diets compared to rural populations and urban populations. And one thing we know is that kestrels that live in the city are slightly more flexible perhaps in their diet. They feed predominantly on things like small birds or large birds, medium-sized birds, as this one is eating this pigeon here. And they'll still use the same hunting strategy in terms of an ambush, but rather than hovering, they'll sit on a perch and jump down on a bird that perhaps isn't very well, isn't particularly doing brilliantly. But they're also flexible in another way in the cities, in the terms of how they lay their eggs or when they lay their eggs. So both male and female will come back to the breeding season, their breeding spot, between March and May, and they can decide when to lay their eggs a little bit more flexibly. They're not, because of their diet, restricted to the emergence of caterpillars like lots of our smaller birds are. But they can lay, you know, towards the end of March or towards the middle of May, and they can still do well in that scenario. So these two adaptations, being able to change their diet in the cities and deciding when to lay, gives them a little bit more flexibility that you think on the surface they might be doing okay. But sadly, looking at a study in Vienna and across mainland Europe, we find that kestrels actually in our cities don't do quite so well. The success of their nests, the success of their fledglings isn't as good. This is likely due to disturbance or predation, smaller broods, because there's less food available for them to find. So it's so important, of course, that we're looking into our kestrel populations, understanding why they're declining, especially here in Scotland, where we're not quite sure on what the answer is. But lots of work is going into that.